Humans had always been the underdogs in the galaxy. They were new to the vast expanse of space, and their technology was primitive compared to the ancient and powerful races that populated the stars for centuries. They had fought many battles and lost just as many, but they never gave up. They always found a way to survive and adapt. It was this sheer will that kept humanity going despite the overwhelming odds they faced in the war against the Gorthax, a ruthless species bent on conquering the galaxy. When the ancient alien race known as the Ithrani offered to help humanity, it seemed like a miracle, but the gift they offered was not one of weapons or advanced ships. Instead, they gave the humans a single vessel said to be the pinnacle of their technology. It was a sleek, beautiful ship with smooth contours and shimmering surfaces designed with an elegance that seemed almost too delicate to survive the brutality of space combat. The Ithrani said it would be a fragile vessel unlike any other, and that humanity would need to rely on its intelligence and resourcefulness to make it work. Captain Ilara Quinn stood on the bridge of the ship gazing out at the stars. The ship was an enigma to her. Its advanced systems and sleek design promised a level of sophistication humanity had never known, but the hull was thin, almost impossibly fragile compared to the heavily armored ships the humans had grown accustomed to. At first, she felt a flicker of doubt. Could this really be their salvation? But as the weight of the situation settled on her shoulders, she realized one thing: the Ithrani might have given them a fragile vessel, but humans were anything but fragile. She turned to her crew, her most trusted officers, each one a brilliant mind in their own right. They were a mix of engineers, pilots, tacticians, and scientists, chosen from all corners of Earth to serve on this mission. Captain Quinn spoke, her voice firm and determined. This is it, everyone. We've been given an opportunity, but it's up to us to make it work. The ship may seem fragile, but we will make it invincible. It's not the ship that defines us, it's the crew we have and the way we think and adapt when faced with challenges. The crew exchanged glances, nodding in agreement. It was a tall order, but they were ready. They had faced impossible odds before and had never backed down. They would find a way to turn this fragile vessel into a force to be reckoned with. The hum of the ship's engines vibrated beneath their feet as they began their first mission, a reconnaissance run deep into Gorthax territory. As they moved deeper into enemy space, the ship's sensors picked up faint traces of Gorthax ships moving in the distance. Captain Quinn ordered evasive maneuvers. As they approached their first test, the enemy was closing in fast, but they wouldn't be able to match the humans' ingenuity and adaptability. The fragile vessel might have been a gift from the Ithrani, but it was humanity's spirit that would turn it into a weapon capable of taking on the galaxy's fiercest foes. The first test came quicker than expected. As they approached the heart of Gorthax space, Captain Quinn felt the tension in the air. Every member of the crew was on edge. The ship's fragile frame hummed as the sensors picked up the unmistakable signature of Gorthax warships. Ahead, the crew quickly ran through the standard procedure for evasion, but there was no time for hesitation. They were outnumbered and outgunned, and the ship's fragile exterior was no match for the Gorthax's massive weaponry. Captain Quinn could feel her pulse quicken. She knew the stakes. This wasn't just about survival. It was about proving humanity could adapt. When faced with impossible odds, they had been given this vessel by the Ithrani for a reason, and they couldn't let it fail. Her hand moved instinctively to the comms panel. She spoke with the calm authority that had earned her respect among her crew. This is it. We've been given a fragile vessel, and we will make it work. But we need to stay focused. No matter what happens, trust each other and adapt. The crew sprang into action, each one moving with purpose. As the Gorthax ships closed in, their weapons fired a barrage of plasma that rocked the fragile ship. Captain Quinn watched the redouts. Her stomach sank as she saw the damage the shields held for now, but they were weakening fast. If they didn't find a way to evade soon, they would be sitting ducks. She had one shot to make this work. They needed to outthink the enemy. Quinn turned to her chief strategist, Lieutenant Marcus Lee, who had been scanning the enemy formation. He was a young officer with an uncanny ability to read the battlefield and think 3 steps ahead. He looked up from his console and met her gaze. We can't outrun them, Captain, but we can outsmart them. The Gorthax are predictable. They charge in headfirst, thinking their size will overwhelm us. We can use that against them. Captain Quinn nodded. We'll need to use every advantage She ordered the crew to make evasive maneuvers. The fragile ship twisted and darted through space, using the asteroid fields nearby to hide their movements. As the Gorthax closed in, they fired again. But this time the humans were ready. The fragile vessel weaved and ducked around incoming fire. Each twist and turn a gamble, but it was their only chance. The Gorthax ships fired blindly in an attempt to hit the elusive target, but they missed again and again. As the minutes passed, the Gorthax grew more frustrated. They began to split their forces in an attempt to corner the human ship, but that's exactly what Captain Quinn wanted. With a precise command, she ordered the crew to move towards a nearby debris field. The Gorthax ships followed, thinking they had the humans trapped, but they didn't know what the humans had planned. Quinn saw the opportunity. As the Gorthax ships entered the debris field, she ordered the fragile ship to drop its shields and coast, just long enough for the enemy to get in range. The gamble was risky, but it paid off as the Gorthax ships passed too close to the debris and collided with the floating asteroids in a massive explosion. One ship down, 2 more disabled. The humans had turned the tables in the most unexpected way. The Gorthax were stunned as the fragile vessel slipped out of the debris field unharmed. The crew erupted in cheers. Captain Quinn allowed herself a brief smile, but she knew this was only the beginning. The fragile ship had survived its first test, and humanity had proven that no matter the odds, they would find a way to win. After the battle, Captain Quinn gathered her crew in the war room. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a sense of pride. As well, they had done the impossible. They had survived the first encounter with the Gorthax and turned their fragile vessel into a symbol of their resilience. But the fight was far from over. The Gorthax would be back, and next time they would be prepared. The crew needed to rethink their strategy, and fast. Lieutenant Marcus Lee was the first to speak, his voice calm but filled with urgency. We can't keep relying on evasive maneuvers and luck forever, Captain. The Gorthax will learn from their mistakes and adapt. If we don't find a way to fight back head-on, we'll be in trouble. Captain Quinn nodded. She knew he was right. They couldn't afford to be caught off guard again. Their survival depended on more than just clever tricks. They needed to make the ship itself more of a weapon. Quinn turned to Chief Engineer Dr. Emily Wright, who had been working tirelessly to improve the ship's systems. Wright had been the first to see the potential of the fragile vessel's design, and now she was eager to take it a step further. I've been running simulations based on what we learned from the first engagement, Captain, she said, and I think I have an idea. We can't reinforce the entire hull without compromising the ship's speed, but we can reinforce key areas with adaptive shielding. This would allow us to take more hits without sacrificing our maneuverability. The idea was bold, but Captain Quinn trusted Dr. Wright's expertise. She turned to the rest of the crew. What do you think? She asked. The crew members exchanged glances. Lieutenant Lee spoke first. It's risky, but if it works, we'll be able to survive longer in a firefight and keep the Gorthax guessing about our next move. Captain Quinn smiled. That was exactly the kind of thinking they needed. The ship's fragility wouldn't be a weakness anymore. It would be a strength they could use against their enemies. Quinn made her decision. We'll go with it then. Everyone get to work. We don't have time to waste. The modifications began immediately. Every crew member was assigned a task. Engineers worked around the clock, reprogramming the ship's AI to optimize its defensive systems, while the tactical officers worked on devising new strategies based on their newfound knowledge of the Gorthax forces. Captain Quinn stayed in constant communication with the team, checking progress and offering guidance. After days of intense work, the modifications were complete. The ship now had a network of adaptive shields that could absorb energy from enemy weapons and redistribute it to reinforce weak points in the hull. As long as the shields stayed active, the ship would be able to endure much more punishment without sacrificing its speed or agility. The crew tested the system by simulating various combat scenarios and refining their tactics in the process. Finally, Captain Quinn called her crew together once again. We've made the fragile vessel stronger, she said, but we still have one more thing to prove. We need to take the fight to the Gorthax and show them that humanity is a force to be reckoned with. Lieutenant Lee, you've got the tactical plan ready. Lieutenant Wright, the ship is ready to handle the upgrades. It's time to show them what we can do. The crew stood together in that moment, knowing that what they had built was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's ability to adapt and overcome every challenge that came their way. The Gorthaks might have underestimated them once, but now they would see just how dangerous humans could be when they fought with everything they had. Captain Quinn stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. The crew had worked tirelessly to make the fragile vessel more than just a ship now. It was a weapon capable of surprising even the most advanced enemies. The Gorthaks would never expect what they were about to face. Quinn looked over at Lieutenant Lee, who stood next to her studying the tactical readouts. "We've got a chance to strike a decisive blow, Captain," he said, his eyes scanning the data on his console. "The Gorthaks have a fleet stationed near the Draconis system. It's a high-value target. We can hit them hard if we act fast." Captain Quinn took a deep breath. The decision was a bold one, but the humans had proven time and time again they could adapt to any challenge. Lieutenant Lee had formulated a plan to infiltrate the Gorthaks fleet and cripple their command structure before they even knew what hit them. It was a high-risk move, but the fragile vessel was no longer fragile. It was a weapon, and they had to use it to its full potential. "Let's do it," she said with determination. "Set the course for the Draconis system, full speed ahead." Lieutenant Lee adjusted the ship's trajectory, and the crew sprang into action. The ship moved swiftly through space, its sleek frame cutting through the void as the Gorthaks fleet remained unaware of the humans' approach. Quinn knew they would need to rely on stealth and precision if they had any chance of success. Their vessel's agility and upgraded shields would give them the edge they needed, but it would all come down to timing. As they neared the Draconis system, the crew went silent, every member focused on their task. The ship's sensors picked up the first signs of the Gorthaks fleet. They were stationed near a massive asteroid belt with their ships scattered and vulnerable. Captain Quinn's voice cut through the tension. "We have one shot at this," she said. "We're going to use the asteroid belt to our advantage. We'll slip past their perimeter and disable their flagship before they even realize we're here." The crew nodded in agreement. Lieutenant Lee activated the ship's cloaking system, and the fragile vessel blended into the shadows of the asteroid belt. They moved silently through the rocks and debris, staying just out of the Gorthaks' detection range. Their plan was simple: slip past the enemy fleet, disable the flagship, and escape before they could react. It was a calculated gamble, but the crew had faith in their ship and their abilities. As they approached the flagship, Captain Quinn gave the order to drop the cloaking system. For a brief moment, the fragile vessel appeared in full view of the enemy, but instead of engaging directly, the humans used the ship's upgraded shields to absorb the Gorthaks' initial attack, while the crew scrambled to disable the flagship's power core. Within seconds, the ship's shields took the brunt of the hit and held strong. The Gorthaks were stunned, but the humans moved quickly, using the ship's advanced systems to hack into the flagship's network and cripple its defenses. The Gorthaks flagship was no longer a threat, and the humans had won their first major victory. The remaining Gorthaks ships scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The humans had already escaped into the asteroid belt, once more leaving chaos in their wake. The fragile vessel had proven its worth, once again showing the galaxy that humanity could turn the odds in their favor, no matter how impossible they seemed. Captain Quinn watched as the last of the Gorthaks ships retreated from the battlefield. A small smile appeared on her face. They had done it. They had taken the fight to the enemy and won. This wasn't just a victory for the ship or the crew, it was a victory for humanity. The fragile vessel had been forged in adversity and had proven that even the most delicate things could be made invincible with the right willpower. Word of the humans' victory spread quickly throughout the galaxy. The news that a small band of humans had taken on a superior fleet and emerged victorious against the Gorthaks made waves across the cosmos. The fragile vessel, once thought too delicate to survive in the brutal world of galactic warfare, had become a symbol of human ingenuity and perseverance. Captain Quinn and her crew found themselves at the center of a story that was bigger than just a single battle. Humanity had earned the respect of many across the stars. Alliances began to form between humans and various other species that had once viewed them as insignificant in the grand scheme of the galaxy. The Ithrani, the ancient race that had gifted humanity the fragile vessel, watched with increasing curiosity as humanity's resilience became legendary. The fragile ship had done what no one expected. It had outsmarted the Gorthax and crippled their fleet. But it wasn't just the ship, it was the humans inside it that had made the difference. Quen stood on the bridge of the ship once more, watching the stars as they passed by. She could sense the shift in the air. It wasn't just her crew that was changing, the galaxy was watching them. And they were beginning to see humanity for what it truly was. The underdogs no longer looked so small. The fragile vessel was no longer just a symbol of fragility. It had become a representation of the strength that came from the human spirit. As Captain Quen walked down the halls of the ship, she could feel the weight of the changes around her. The crew was no longer just surviving, they were thriving. They had learned how to push the fragile vessel to its limits, and beyond. They had come to understand its intricacies and how to use its design to their advantage. The ship's AI had evolved into a key asset in their operations, constantly updating their tactics and strategies based on real-time data from every mission they had undertaken. The fragile vessel had become an extension of their will, their ingenuity. But the growing reputation of humanity wasn't without its consequences. The Gorthax had been humiliated, and their leaders were enraged. The defeat had shaken their confidence in their ability to dominate the galaxy. The Gorthax High Command issued orders for an all-out offensive on the humans. They could not afford to let the humans grow stronger. The fragile vessel had struck a blow to their pride, and they would do everything in their power to erase that humiliation. In the midst of the growing conflict, the galaxy's other powers began to take notice. Some feared the rise of humanity's influence, while others saw an opportunity to align themselves with the humans. Many thought the Gorthax would crush them in the end, but Captain Quen and her crew had proven time and again that humanity could overcome the impossible. Every battle had forged them into something more than just survivors. They were becoming a force to be reckoned with. As Captain Quen sat down in her quarters, she glanced over the data from the latest battle. The fragile vessel had survived again, and humanity had struck another blow against the Gorthax. She knew the stakes were higher now. The next battle would be even more dangerous. But the reputation of the humans had grown beyond expectations. They had proven that they could fight back, and that they could change the course of the war with each victory. The fragile vessel was becoming more than just a ship. It was a symbol of hope and resilience for all who had been oppressed for too long in the galaxy. Humanity's fight had just begun, but there was no doubt anymore. The galaxy was watching, and humanity was ready to make its mark. The calm that followed humanity's victory was short-lived. As expected, the Gorthax were not ones to accept defeat gracefully, and their response came swift and brutal. They had regrouped and forged an alliance with several other alien races that had once looked down on humans, and now they were preparing to launch an all-out assault to crush humanity's newfound strength. Captain Quen could feel the tension building as the fragile vessel made its way toward the frontier. She could sense the storm coming. Communications from Allied forces poured in, daily warnings about Gorthax movements and their increasing numbers. The fragile ship's sensors were constantly scanning for signs of an incoming fleet. Every officer on the bridge was on high alert. But even as they prepared for the worst, Captain Quen knew the battle ahead wouldn't be like the others. This time they would be facing not only the Gorthax, but an entire armada of alien forces bent on wiping humanity from the stars. The crew gathered in the war room once again. The room was filled with a sense of urgency as Captain Quen walked in, her eyes scanning the faces of her officers. They were ready. They had proven themselves time and time again. But this time would be different. She could see the weight of the challenge ahead in their eyes. We're facing the largest force the Gorthax have ever assembled, she said, her voice steady but firm. We need to be smart. We need to fight on our terms. Lieutenant Lee was already at the tactical board analyzing the enemy's movements. He turned to Captain Quen with a look of determination. We've studied their tactics. We know they'll come at us with overwhelming force. They'll try to surround us and trap us, but we have one thing they don't have. He paused for a moment, then spoke again with a confident smile. We have the fragile vessel, and we've learned to use it like no one else can. Captain Quen nodded. That's right, the ship might have been fragile. when we started, but it's more than that now. It's an extension of us, our minds, our will. We've made it into something they won't expect." She turned to the rest of the crew. "We'll use everything we've learned from our past battles and push the Gorthax into a position where they can't win." Lieutenant Wright, are the upgrades holding? Chief Engineer Wright gave a quick nod. "The adaptive shielding is holding strong, and we've adjusted the maneuvering thrusters to give us better agility. We'll be able to evade their attacks with ease." Captain Quinn's eyes narrowed as she processed the information. They had one shot at this. They couldn't afford to make mistakes. The next few days were filled with intense preparation. Every crew member was working tirelessly to fine-tune the ship's systems and run through combat drills designed to maximize their chances of survival. Captain Quinn spent sleepless nights going over the strategy again and again, ensuring that every detail was accounted for, every possibility considered. Finally, the day arrived. The Gorthax armada appeared in the distance, their massive ships darkening the void of space. The humans were vastly outnumbered, but Captain Quinn had never felt more confident in her crew. The fragile vessel was ready. It had been tested in combat and had proved its worth. Now it was time to show the galaxy just how far humanity had come. The battle began with the Gorthax charging in with full force, their weapons blazing. The fragile vessel danced through the fire, using its newfound agility to avoid the worst of the incoming attacks. The ship's shields absorbed the hits and redirected energy to key points, strengthening the hull where it needed it most. The Gorthax didn't know what to expect. They thought the humans would be easy prey. But Captain Quinn had a plan. The fragile vessel wasn't just running, it was leading the Gorthax into a trap. With precise movements and calculated maneuvers, the humans drew the Gorthax fleet further into the system, towards a massive asteroid field, where the Gorthax would be forced to fight in a tight, confined space. The humans had baited them into the perfect position. The Gorthax fleet moved forward with relentless determination. Captain Quinn watched as their massive warships closed in. They were confident in their numbers. They believed the humans would break under the pressure, but they didn't know the plan the humans had devised. The fragile vessel had lured the Gorthax into the asteroid field. Now it was time for the next phase of the strategy. The key to victory was precision and patience. Lieutenant Lee studied the battlefield, his eyes flicking between his tactical board and the view screens showing the enemy fleet. "We have them exactly where we want them," he said, his voice low but filled with excitement. "Their fleet is divided, and they're running out of space to maneuver. We can take them down piece by piece." Captain Quinn nodded. They had taken a huge risk by drawing the Gorthax into the asteroid field, but now they had to make sure the trap was sprung. The fragile vessel glided through the field, its sensors scanning the rocks for any sign of danger. The ship was nimble and quick, avoiding the debris, as if it was part of the void itself. The Gorthax ships, however, were struggling to keep up. Their size and weight were too much for the tight quarters of the asteroid field. Their movements were slower, more predictable. It was exactly what Captain Quinn had been counting on. Quinn turned to her crew. "This is it," she said. "We've got one shot at this. Keep your focus, stay sharp, and don't let them get away." Lieutenant Lee gave the order to begin the assault. Lieutenant Lee's fingers moved across the console, activating the ship's weapons systems. He turned to Captain Quinn with a determined look on his face. "We're starting with their flanks," he said. "The Gorthax won't see it coming." The fragile vessel moved quickly into position, its weapon systems locked on to the first target, a smaller Gorthax ship positioned at the edge of the fleet. The humans fired a precise volley of energy blasts that hit the enemy ship's weak points. The Gorthax vessel exploded in a burst of fire and debris. The humans moved fast, taking out the next target with ruthless efficiency. One after another, they picked off the smaller Gorthax ships that had been left vulnerable as the fleet was stretched thin. Their numbers were quickly dwindling, but the Gorthax weren't going to give up easily. The remaining ships turned to face the fragile vessel with anger and desperation. The battle intensified. The Gorthax fired with all their might, but the humans were too quick. Their adaptive shielding absorbed the brunt of the attacks and redirected energy to reinforce the most vulnerable parts of the ship. The Gorthax found themselves unable to land a decisive blow. Each strike felt less like a victory and more like a last-ditch effort to stop the inevitable. But the humans weren't just defending, they were attacking with precision and calculated force. They used the asteroid field to their advantage, weaving in and out of the rocks to stay hidden. While picking off enemy targets, the fragile vessel was no longer the underdog. It had become the perfect predator in the shadows. Captain Quinn looked on as the final Gorthax ships fell one by one, their once proud fleet reduced to nothing more than burning wreckage in the void of space. She could feel the adrenaline still rushing through her veins, but there was no time to savor the victory. The mission wasn't over yet. They had accomplished the impossible once again, but Captain Quinn knew the Gorthax would not let this defeat slide. They would come back stronger, more determined, and the fragile vessel would need to be ready for whatever came next. The crew gathered on the bridge in silence as they watched the last of the Gorthax ships explode. Their victory was hard-earned but undeniable. Humanity had once again proven that no matter the odds, they could take on the most powerful forces in the galaxy. The aftermath of the battle left the galaxy in stunned silence. The Gorthax fleet had been shattered beyond repair, and humanity had once again defied the odds. The fragile vessel had proved its worth, and its crew had proven themselves as some of the most capable soldiers in the galaxy. Captain Quinn stood on the bridge of the ship looking out at the stars as they slowly drifted by. She could feel the weight of the victory, but also the burden of what came next. The Gorthax had been beaten, but the war was far from over. The crew gathered in the war room discussing the fallout from the battle. Lieutenant Lee was the first to speak. "We've struck a major blow against the Gorthax. Their forces are scattered, and their morale is shattered. But they're not finished yet," he said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "They'll regroup and come back stronger. We have to be ready for that." Captain Quinn nodded. She had known this moment would come. The Gorthax would never give up, not easily anyway. But humanity had done something that no one had thought possible. They had proven that even the most fragile vessel could be turned into an unstoppable force when wielded by those with the will to fight. "We've given them something to think about," she said, her voice resolute. "But we can't rest on our laurels now. We need to take advantage of the opening we've created." The rest of the crew agreed. They knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while they felt hope, a hope that they could win, a hope that they could drive the Gorthax back and secure humanity's place in the galaxy. They had taken the first step. Now they had to keep moving forward. But the galaxy had also taken notice of humanity's strength. As their reputation spread, so too did the alliances that formed around them. The once skeptical species that had dismissed humanity as insignificant now sought to align themselves with the humans, and their newfound power emboldened by the humans' victories. Many of these species began to offer their support, providing resources, intelligence, and reinforcements for the upcoming battles. The humans had become the spark that would light a fire in the galaxy. Captain Quinn felt the weight of this responsibility as she stood at the helm of the fragile vessel. Their victories had earned them allies, but also enemies. The Gorthax would no longer be their only threat. As more factions began to take sides in the galactic war, humanity would need to navigate a complex web of politics and power struggles, but they were no longer alone. As the fragile vessel cruised through space, Captain Quinn couldn't help but reflect on everything they had accomplished. They had started as the underdogs, with nothing but a fragile ship and a crew determined to survive. Now they were becoming a beacon of hope for the galaxy, a symbol of what could be achieved when people fought for what they believed in. The mission was far from over, but humanity had come a long way. They had learned to turn their weaknesses into strengths, to adapt and overcome whatever obstacles stood in their way. The fragile vessel had been forged in the heat of battle and had become a testament to the power of human ingenuity and spirit. As the ship moved toward its next destination, Captain Quinn knew that there would be more battles ahead, more challenges to face, but for the first time in a long while she wasn't worried, because she knew that as long as humanity stood together, as long as they had their will to fight, the galaxy would have no choice but to recognize their strength. They had given the galaxy a glimpse of what humans were capable of, and it was only the beginning.